Hello, my name is Edwin Rutsch, and I'm the director of the Empathy Center located here in beautiful Santa Barbara, California. The center's mission is to build the empathy movement and to raise the level of empathy in society through education and community building initiatives.
And my name is Anita Nowak. I teach at McGill University, and I'm the author of Purposeful Empathy, a book that invites readers to turn up the volume of empathy in their lives.
And at the beginning of 2024, Anita and I co-hosted the Empathy Summit, brought to you by the Empathy Center, and more than 40 authors of books about empathy participated.
They shared what their book was about, why they were motivated to write it, and what they hope readers will take away. Thank you so much for watching, and we hope you'll buy their book.
We have our next speaker, and that is Peter Sear. And Peter is a psychologist and empathy advocate, and he is the author of Empathic Leadership, Lessons from Elite Sports. I don't know if you have a copy of the book to wave there, handy. There it is. Got to plug that book. So the floor is yours, Peter.
Thank you very much, Edwin. How you doing, all right? Real pleasure to be here. It's a magnificent event for you to organise. Thanks to you and Anita. So what's my book about? My book is about empathy in the highly competitive environment of elite sport. My assumption was that if empathy offers an advantage in elite sport, it will offer an advantage anywhere because it's one of the most competitive environments you can find. It's based on my own PhD research. I looked at how, when and why empathy is valued by leaders in elite sport working at the top of the industry. I worked with 20 different teams, mostly at international level, so the top level of elite sport, interviewing head coaches from 11 different nations in 9 different team sports. And I found that empathy has become more valued over the last couple of decades, and that there's been a big change in the way head coaches lead teams. In that a couple of decades ago, it was a more autocratic, dictatorial style. And now there's a more empathic sort of style to leadership. And the people that I interviewed working at the top end of sport fell into 2 categories. So there was the experienced coach who felt that they had to become more empathic to stay with the game and to remain competitive. And there were a lot of younger leaders who said that they felt that they have quite an empathic personality, and that the role of leader in sport wouldn't have been right for them 20 years ago, but now it's more appreciated by organisations and athletes. So the sort of time is right for them to do their work. So how's this expressed? The head coaches of teams now work on a very much more athlete-centred approach. The leader doesn't consider themselves the most important person in the room. They value the input of athletes, and they like to get to know athletes. Empathic communication is a big part of their leadership. They consider the modes of communication, the timing of communication, and how that affects the perspective of athletes. They like to engage in far closer relationships with athletes to get to know, understand the motives, the strengths and weaknesses, the concerns, anything that affects the performance of the athlete, so that they can allocate tasks appropriately, recognise potential, and understand the real human being behind the athlete. They like to work in safer climates, so they value the climate in which the athlete is working in. And safe climate, as we know, encourages creativity. So athletes who work in a safer climate are more likely to offer their own ideas and not be scared to do so. So that encourages a more creative feel to the whole environment. The development of teams, of empathy in teams, is also something that these leaders are focusing on now. So they're looking at inter-athlete empathy. So athletes understanding each other more, getting to know the backgrounds. The world of sport is typically full of teams with athletes from a variety of demographics. And it's important that athletes understand where each has come from and the struggles they've had to get to where they are in sport, and the motivations that they have, and the way they like to be spoken to during competition, etc. It just brings a more cohesive unit to the organisation or the group. Why did I write the book? I've often been frustrated about how the academic world and what I'd refer to as the real world are often too far apart. So a lot of research seems to just remain in academia and not be utilised by the people that would have most to gain from it. So I wanted to write something that was accessible for those people to read. So not something that was written in an academic style like my PhD thesis, but something that was written in the language of leaders today and leaders in sport in particular. So where possible, I've actually incorporated the language or the actual words and phrases of the coaches that I interviewed within the text. So hopefully that makes it a more accessible and enjoyable read for any sort of head coaches in sport who want to develop a more empathic style. And the other reason I wrote it is because I just want to improve people's lives. You know, as a psychologist, I think that's what we're here to do, isn't it? It's to do anything we can that makes people's worlds better for them. You know, like, so that they're places where their well-being is protected, where they can fulfil their own potential. Why did I choose this subject? So I've studied psychology over 3 decades, and I've studied it from a neuropsychology perspective to a depth psychology perspective. And I've always interested in why people behave the way they do, why they do certain things, and in particular, emotions as drivers or limiters of behavior. And so I thought that empathy encompasses that, because it's the understanding of other people's worlds, other people's emotions, and that allows people to forecast behaviors. So the better we know people, the more we can predict what they will do in certain situations. And I saw this as invaluable to a leader. I've also been fortunate enough to be chosen as a leader myself in sport and in work. And I often wondered why. And I think it's because I was somebody who's probably very curious about other people and always interacting with everybody across a group, rather than staying within a certain group within a group, if you know what I mean. So I think that's something that's been recognised. And when I've reflected on it and realised that, I've thought that kind of correlates with what I see as empathic leadership, you know, getting to know everybody within a group. And if that's something that's been valued in me, why isn't it being valued in all leaders? The other thing that I saw a lot growing up was that I was with a professional football club when I was a teenager, and I saw a lot of really talented footballers not get retained by the club, and wondered why this was. And I saw a lot of people who were retained, probably with not as much ability. And I think it was often because the people weren't taking the time to understand athletes, to get to know them, and get to know why they might not have been feeling comfortable enough to display those talents or skills. And they were just going for the people that just did what they said and played the game as it was then. But this was just such a massive waste as far as I was concerned. And I thought, if this is happening in all industries, then a more empathic way of leading would assure that we don't sort of lose talent and we allow people to do the things that they're meant to be doing. Another thing that is often associated with successful sport leaders, they often get labelled great man managers. And this phrase man management was something that I've always sort of caught my attention in sport. And I think it's correlates with what the empathic leader is. A man manager is someone who knows how to talk to each individual and doesn't have a set way of being in the presence of all of their athletes. And so if these man managers were sort of famous in sport for being successful, why wasn't that style of leadership being developed and focused on? So that was another reason. Lastly, I've always hated very sort of corporate environments with hard hierarchies and where no input from people who are being led is allowed. And it's always been a strange thing for me that these environments that are created like that within corporations are just places where people hate to be. And it's really unlikely that anyone's going to do their best work in an environment that they hate being in. So again, it just seemed a crazy thing. And I thought if I can prove that empathy offers advantages in competitive environments, then more people will take it up. And it will spread that way of leading and hopefully improve people's experiences in the workplace. What do I hope readers will take away from this book? I've already had coaches in sport contact me and say that they have appreciated the book because it's filled gaps in their development. So they've done coaching badges where they've had development as far as their technical abilities are concerned and their knowledge, and perhaps a bit of leadership work, but not so much focusing on the psychology of relationships and communication. And this way of encompassing that information in empathic leadership has helped their development. So that's obviously good to hear. I've also had athletes tell me that they've read the book and it's helped them decide that they want to become leaders in sport because they see themselves as that sort of person that understands other people. And when they've read the book and realised that it's being valued now in sport, and it gives them an opportunity to follow that pathway. Leaders from other industries, I hope, will gain something from this. I think sports a very transparent and familiar industry to most people. We often all know sort of the characters involved or the organisations involved. So hopefully this book is accessible to people across industries, and some of the practices, behaviours and personalities that I talk about within it will be helpful whatever industry you're in. So hopefully it can do some good for everybody and improve people's lives. If we're in workplaces that are led by empathic leaders, we should all be appreciated and recognised for who we are, and allowed to sort of maximise our potential and become the best we can be within that industry. So now I'm helping people in sport and across other industries as well with leadership in developing their empathic style of leadership. So if there's anybody out there listening who wants help with that, please contact me. And anyone else, buy the book, and I hope it helps.
Okay, thank you so much, Peter. Good to see you again.